Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Cantey, and this is another episode of Living Enlightened Every Single Day. Today, we're looking at useful versus non-useful thinking. We could say limited versus non-limited or expansive thinking. Why? Because our thoughts are creating our words, our actions, our habits, our character, and eventually that is taking us straight towards our destiny. Yep, that's what we're looking at today. Stay tuned. I'm Elizabeth Cantey, and I love to help people integrate spirit, mind, and body in order to live each day with that deep sense of purpose, passion, and fulfillment. And what better way than asking ourselves, who am I being? Who am I being right now? Because when we check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, who am I being? We can actually change who we are being consciously and become that person we've always known ourselves to be. And how do we start that? It's our thoughts. Many mystics and spiritual teachers are credited with this saying, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. And Buddha is credited with saying, if you do not change your direction, you will get where you're going. So we're looking at our thoughts today, how our thoughts got us to where we are. And the first thing I thought we'd look at is this idea of useful versus non-useful thoughts, limited versus non-limited or expansive thoughts. So let's dive right in. The first level, let's say, of thought would be thoughts that arise on behalf of our body. And that's a good question. Where is this thought coming from? I think it's Rupert Spira who says, on whose behalf, with his lovely English accent, on whose behalf does this thought arise? So I say, where's this thought coming from? Is it from the body? If we hear that thought, I'm hungry. And so we run to the refrigerator and hopefully pull out something very nourishing. So that thought is on behalf of the body. It's coming from hunger. It's nourishing the body. Is that a useful thought or a non-useful thought, limiting or non-limiting? We would probably all agree that it's pretty useful. If you walk outside and you are surprised at how cold it is, there's a thought, I should get my jacket. You might think for a minute, is it that cold? And you say, yes. We want to protect the body. We want to make sure we're comfortable wherever it is we're going, and we go grab a jacket or a sweater. And that's that. That thought is on behalf of the body. It's useful, you would say, neither limiting nor non-limiting. It's not expansive. It's just a useful thought. And then we have thoughts that I would say come from infinite mind. Right? Infinite mind. We're going all the way to the other end of the spectrum. We have the body, the solid, the dense, the in space, in time, and we go to infinite mind. And I just have this idea, if I hold up this piece of paper and we couldn't just imagine for a moment that this paper, this white paper, it's empty of everything and it expands in all directions. And on that white piece of paper, we could imagine that there are little circles, circles drawn in, and each circle would be my finite mind and your finite mind and 8 billion minds. But the thing about this circle is that those circles are not drawn in a solid line, or there's not a solid boundary for our minds. It's hyphenated if we were drawing in two-dimensional, or a 3D image would be perforated. You know, this idea that the mind can expand and contract, right? Actually, Daryl Anka was talking about that in that video a few weeks ago. I'll put it in the notes. It's the idea of our mind is one in, one with infinite mind. So we might say that my mind, this circle that is hyphenated or perforated, is my finite mind, and you might think you have your finite mind, but it is all in one mind, oneness, wholeness, which is why when you think about it, people have psychic abilities. They're able to expand beyond what we might call my finite knowing, my education, my experiences, my memories, and I might be able to expand when I come near you, your hyphenated circle. I might be able to pick up on your memories, your experiences, someone who has passed in your life. So there's psychic abilities as we expand into infinite mind. So I say that thoughts that arise from infinite mind are those thoughts. We're just minding our own business. We're walking down the street and we have this thought, this idea that comes to us out of nowhere, out of, now I'm going to a box imagery, out of the box, you know, out of the circle, out of nowhere comes this idea, a solution to a problem we may have had for a year, a business solution. And we call our partner, we say, I just had this idea, this crazy idea. What do you think? And they're just going off like, oh my gosh, how did you come up with that? And you're like, I don't know. That's spirit. That's infinite mind. That's out of the box. You know, we are expanding into that which we don't know. And that perforated circle includes all that we do know, all of our experiences, all of our memories, all of our thoughts, you know, everything that we would define as us. And everything outside of that is what we don't know yet. So it's a new experience. It's an expansion, we could call it, something like that. So it's an analogy. But those thoughts from infinite mind, they could be a thought for a piece of music, if you're a musician, or a piece of art, if you're creative, or a new business, just an idea about something that feels like it hasn't been done, or that it hasn't been done like you would do it. And it's inspiring in spirit, in infinite mind, these thoughts come to us. And it's such a beautiful place to be, isn't it? Those thoughts, useful? Yes. Limiting? No. Expansive? Yes. Right? So now we're getting some ideas about this thinking, useful and non-useful thinking. And then, so we go back to the finite mind. And the finite mind, as I said, is this collection of memories and ideas and beliefs and concepts. It's education. It's all of these things about our bodies that we remember or know. And so it's a wonderful thing when we want to drive to our in-laws' house. We remember how to get there. We know how to turn on the computer. We know our grandmother's favorite chicken and rice recipe. Or if you're vegan, you're going to make it with tofu now, right? It's a beautiful thing, this finite mind, when we choose to use it. These thoughts are not limiting. They're not expansive, perhaps, but they're not limiting, and they are useful when we need to go to the in-laws' house or file our taxes. We think about it and can remember what we need to do. So then we talk about the ego. And the ego, again, like all of these, they're not separate, solid entities. The ego itself, I call it a subset of our finite mind. It is a set of beliefs. And what is a belief but a thought that we think over and over again? And so it's thoughts that we have identified ourselves as through the senses. So we look in a mirror and we see what we look at. I am this old. I look like this, I drive a car that is this, and I have these experiences and these memories. I am separate from you. So the ego is the sense of separate. You're not this. If I put my hand on a hot stove, you're not reacting. I am. So I'm different. I'm separate. When I put my hand on a cold surface, I feel coolness and you don't. So I must be separate. We get those thoughts that become our beliefs and become our actions. We act as if we are separate for a very long time. When we're toddlers, we realize we are not our parents. We realize we are not our siblings. We are separate beings, and the world concurs with us that they are separate from us and that we are separate from them. So it's this idea that we are a separate entity, a separate thing, but it is just a set of beliefs. And it is not the truth of our being. It is not the wholeness, the expansiveness of our being. As a matter of fact, it is the smallest subset of our experiences, of our beingness. The ego, in my opinion, is not necessary to our existence in our bodies. We don't need to feel separate in order to remember how to go to our in-laws' house or file our taxes or make dinner for ourselves or go find our sweater. When we hear of enlightened masters who have, some people use the word ego deaths or things like that. I don't particularly like that because it's not a thing that was alive. So how can it die? We don't kill our ego. What it feels like for me is it's just resting. This is so funny. I always laugh with my own analogies. It's like a toddler in the back seat in the car seat that's falling asleep. It's falling asleep, you know, it wakes up every once in a while and I have to explain, shh, it's okay. We're okay. Everything's fine. And then it goes back to sleep because, you know, toddlers love riding in the car. So that's my weird analogy. And so for many of us, it's just sleeping. And so we get to live our life without these feelings and thoughts and experiences of separation. What does that look like when we go back, let's say, to the body? When we have that thought that we're hungry and we walk to the refrigerator and we get out what it is we want to eat to nourish our bodies. What about the time when we find ourselves standing in front of the refrigerator and we're taking out the leftover pecan pie that we had, and we're just standing there eating, and we don't even realize how long we've been standing there when we walked over there. So now there wasn't a thought that was attached that says, I'm hungry, because we just ate a half an hour ago. So now, where is this activity coming from? Well, for most of us, when we find ourselves eating and we're not hungry, the body is not hungry, we've just fed the body half an hour ago. Usually it's a habit we've created or that has become our character of possibly avoiding. Maybe we're always avoiding work. Maybe it's a response to being bored at work or with schoolwork when we were younger, and now it's with our work in the office. Whatever it is, now it's become a habit. So we're no longer having a thought about it, which is why it's so hard to change those deeply ingrained, conditioned habits that have become our character. Let's use another scenario when we walked out the door and it's cold. When it's just the thought from our finite mind, it's cold. My body's feeling this sensation. It might be uncomfortable on this walk. I'm going to go get a jacket, which we don't comment on. We just go get a jacket. But when the mind does comment, when the mind gets lost in that train of thought, why is it so cold in April? Why does it have to be cold in April? It's never this cold. I wonder if it's global warming. Maybe it's global warming, and I should write to my senator, and I should do this, and we should do that, and I don't even know where my jackets are. Where are my jackets? And there's this running commentary that the thought is just thinking and thinking, and it's going off and it's breaking off into these different segment, is that useful? No. Is it limiting? Absolutely. We don't think it is because we're not judging anything as bad. We're not saying this is terrible, but we're judging. We're judging. We're creating a separation between what's actually happening, it's cold, and our mind is going off into this commentary. The commentary keeps us from being present with what is. So when we talk about being in the present moment, it's never when the mind is just rambling and ranting and commentating and judging. So that is the difference. The ego wants to stay connected to finite mind, to not be sleeping in the back seat. It doesn't want to be relegated to inactivity. So it will just keep projecting itself like a screaming child throwing a tantrum until we learn, wow, that thought, that rambling, these things are coming up on behalf of the ego. So when we think about it, the ego is that subset. It's a contraction of ourselves into the smallest piece that we believe we are separate beings. So there's, for the ego's point of view, there's no perforation. There's no a hyphenation in that drawing of finite mind. It worries, it judges, it compares, it wants to maintain, defend, or elevate its position. It's all it can do because it can only associate itself, these thoughts, with our senses. So when we step out of the ego, we expand that little bit. We expand into that spacious place, and it's our finite mind expanding just a little past that seeming confinement of our own memories, our own history, our conditioned thinking, and it's expanding into that wonderful, empty, spacious place where new thought, inspiration comes from. The ego is always about resisting life as it is. And I categorize these in my book, and for me, it became very helpful at some point. I still use this analogy, and it's called staying out of the jar. I just recently did an episode on that, so I won't go too far into it, but JAR is JARR, and it stands for judgments, attachment, reacting, and resisting. So we know that we're in that ego mode when we are judging. The voices in our head are saying, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. Why is it so cold? That's a judgment. Why is it so hot? And then the ego will answer its own question because it wants to stay relevant in our mind. It will go off on those tangents. But we can't be judging and accepting at the same time. And we can't be complaining and enjoying at the same time. And in the present moment, when everything's just quiet, the ego's in the back seat, the finite mind is ready and available if we want to call on it. I think it's Ram Dass who said the mind makes a great servant, but a terrible master. So it's there when we want our grandmother's recipe, when we need to know to turn left or right, it's there. But infinite mind is also available because there's no chatter, there's no commentary, there's no veil. We're simply being present when we're not in the jar. Attachments is that wonderful thing that the ego does when it believes I have to just hold on to everything just like it is right now. And if I lose this, I lose everything. If I lose her, I lose everything. If I lose this job, I lose everything. And we know what happens when people are so attached to their looks or to their youth. You're going to lose it. Our looks are not the same as we were when we were 2. Probably for most of us, good. When we were 12, again, who wants to be walking around in a 12-year-old body? And when we were 22 and 52, right? So when we're attached to how we look, we're always disappointed that we don't look like we used to look. So we let go of attachments. And that wonderful, I don't know why I'm using the word wonderful, but I laugh. I talk about the ego like that because it's when you recognize what it is, it's just thoughts coming up and it's patterns of thoughts. And this pattern is reactions. When we give someone who they haven't even finished their sentence and we are ready to tell them how wrong they are. That's a conditioned response that is usually immediate, an immediate response to something that they're saying is right or wrong. Sometimes the judgment is, I agree with you and I can't wait for you to stop talking so I can tell you. We're still reacting. We're still not listening. We're not being present to what is, which is someone else trying to commune or communicate with us. And these are all forms of resistance. So judgments, attachments, reactions, and resistance. They're all forms of resistance. It's wanting things to be different than they actually are in this moment. So we're resisting life as it shows up. So we can ask ourselves, who am I being? Am I reacting? Am I attached to this? Am I judging? Am I resisting? And then we can find out, oh, these thoughts are coming up on behalf of the ego, this conditioned thought. So ego thoughts are almost never, I usually try not to use never and always, but for me, it appears at this moment in time and space that they're never useful. It's just never useful to know ourselves as this tiny, compact, limited, stuck in time and space person who only has this memory that it can remember. It's not even accurate. When we understand where thoughts are coming from, we can ask ourselves, where is this thought? How is this thought arising? Is it useful? Is it limiting? Is it expansive? And when we can answer that question, imagine how helpful that is in being able to change our thoughts. I did a workshop this past weekend. It was a 2-hour workshop, which still wasn't enough time. So I'm going to just give you another inkling as to how we process this. But I went back to that saying that is in every mystic tradition in one form or another. But the idea of watch your thoughts, they have become your words. And those words have become your actions, and those actions have become your habits, and those habits have become your character. And if we do not change our character, then we will keep living exactly what we're living now. Joe Dispenza and many other scientists and research has corroborated that we think for between 60 and 90,000 thoughts every day. 90% of those thoughts are repetitive. There are conditioned patterns that we think over and over again. As I said, when we walk to the refrigerator or when we get on Facebook and we have been scrolling through those short videos for an hour and a half. We don't remember when we got on. We don't remember how long it's been. We don't remember the time, but we do remember we didn't finish the project that we were working on for work, right? So our habit is avoiding, and we just got caught up in gaming or getting on a phone call or getting into the refrigerator, or whatever it is that has become our character. Our character is who we are being. So if we want to change, it's going back to these subconscious, patterned, conditioned thoughts. I just wanted to look at some of the characters in our life, and we can maybe see how they've arisen for us. Who are you in this? And I lightheartedly bring this up, but one of the characters is that person who never wants to ask for help, right? I can do it. I can do it. Nope, I can do this. They have to do everything themselves. And somewhere along the way, the ego has told the story that I have to be strong. I need to appear strong. And it might be that idea that no one can do it as good as I am. And that's part of the perfectionist character, right? But I have to do it all myself. And what about the people pleaser? They can go up to 3 different people, and those 3 people will turn around and describe that person as 3 different people, because the person who's a people pleaser is morphing themselves into being liked for each person. They want each person to like them, so they accommodate themselves and their behaviors and the way they speak, the way they are being, to be liked, because somewhere their ego told them a story that they need to be liked. They have to be liked. What about the character who is so considerate? They don't want to bother anyone. I don't want to impose. I don't want to intrude. They're making themselves very small. It's like, I hate to bother you. I hate to ask you this question. And sometimes when we're in a new situation or when we're at work, we take on that we have to be very small because something bad might happen if we're seen or if we are our authentic expression. The ego has decided that it needs to appear small in order to be safe. And I love the person, the character who is brutally honest. I have to tell it like it is. I have to, I just have to tell you. And what they're going to tell you is often not the facts, the way they appear, but it is their opinion. They have to be somewhere their ego has told them that they are right. They always have to appear as being right. They're going to say, I'm brutally honest. I have to be honest. That's who I am. And in fact, they have to be right, because honesty is never brutal. Honesty, true honesty and compassion. We are in that expanded state. We are compassionate because we understand that we are one. We are one with each other. Honesty is from the heart. It is heartfelt, never brutal. And what about the idea that life is hard? That becomes a character. And when we tell our story, life is so hard, it's so hard. And this happened to me, and this happened, and then I got fired, and then I lost my job, and I lost my house, and then I got a new job, but it was terrible. And that boss was really difficult. And then my son got sick. And if you listen to this person, you're like, oh my gosh, your life is really hard. We can't help it because their story is so compelling. Their character is so developed. The ego has created the need to be victimized. It cannot be responsible for all this negativity. So it's created this story that life is hard, that they are a victim of very, very, very unfortunate circumstances. That's our character now. And the opposite could be true. That person who says life is wonderful. Oh, everything's always wonderful. It's always so great. It's just perfect. And that person has created an ego that everything needs to be perfect because it cannot look at the pain and suffering it has experienced. In other words, they're denying life as it showed up because it was painful, because there was some loss or some grief. And in reality, in our finite mind, in our infinite mind, we are capable of handling loss and grief. We're created that way, where love and wholeness is stronger than the sense of loss and grief. But we allow ourselves to go through grief, to go through loss, to process it in healthy ways. But that person that believes life is wonderful, they're not allowing themselves to ever touch on grief or loss. So I just brought up a few of these characters because we no longer think the thoughts anymore. We're standing at the refrigerator. We spent hours gaming. We've spent hours avoiding what we were supposed to avoid, making the phone call to the estranged father, or the child who is sick, whatever it is, we're using our avoidance techniques or our protective techniques that the ego has created a story around since perhaps we were the age of 2 or 2 months, whatever it is. So I just invite us to really kind of take this information of where is this thought coming from? Is it useful, limiting, or expanding? Where is this habit coming from? This action, this activity of avoiding, the activity of reading magazines all day when we really could be doing an agreement that we had, honoring an agreement that we had to do the household chores or whatever it is. So when we find ourselves lost in a habit, or when we have become this character, we can look at it and say, oh, that's the story my ego has told for decades, possibly. And I can love and bless myself for this story. And I have a process that I take people through where we can go back to these events and really get back to infinite mind. We can erase the story and get back to that pure state of awareness or consciousness. And sometimes that's what it takes, a self-love and a self-forgiveness that we've maybe not been able to do up to this point because we've created the habits that have created a character. So I invite you to find ways to identify your character this week. You know, if they're just thoughts, that's beautiful. We can uh, affirm that we are not this limited being, not this subset of egoic thoughts, but in fact, we are an infinite emanation of spirit itself. We are timeless and eternal. We are powerful and creative. And when we are in touch with that, you can feel it when you do it. You can feel it dissolve these patterns, this conditioned thinking. But if that moment or that meditation isn't enough, then by all means ask for help. I have a wonderful technique to go back into self-love and forgiving ourselves and others for having created this limitation in the first place. And it is such a beautiful step to bring us back to our natural state of oneness and wholeness, of love and power and creativity. And from there, we receive those inspired thoughts and we change our destiny. I hope you found this inspiring. I hope this has been helpful. If so, please hit the like button and the subscribe, and perhaps it would be really good to share with a friend. Maybe they're wondering why they're stuck in this character for decades. Who knows? But love and forgiveness and becoming the observer where these thoughts are coming from, asking ourselves, are these useful? Are they limiting? Are they expansive thoughts? On whose behalf is this thought arising? We can absolutely change where we are going, change who we are being in this moment. All this week, I hope you laugh, love, live enlightened, live free from the character that has been created out of lack and limitation, and instead you live from your infinite self. Namaste.